All right. Good evening, everyone. Good to be back again. So, as per usual, or what we've been doing recently, we have some tournament updates, or rather, my game updates from my recent tournaments. I've played one tournament since seeing you guys last, and yeah, didn't go as well as I would hoped for sure. But that being said, and as I kind of also share with you guys in terms of my path to the GM title, um, I need to work on my chess, just like everyone else here. I need to work on my chess, and I mean, I am so far removed from being close to the 2500 rating that I simply need to work on my mentality, work on my overall chess level, and assuming that I am indeed GM strength, right? Or if that is the assumption, then I will eventually get the rating. But if I'm not, and I don't think that at this point right now I can confidently say that I am at GM strength. I certainly can play at GM strength, but based on my recent term performances in the past few months, I definitely cannot make that assertion. So from these bad performances like this, I need to reflect on what went wrong, and you guys are going to get a little bit of a glimpse as to what did went wrong or what did go wrong. So I scored 4 out of 9 points, lost I think around 12 FIDE, which brings me now down back to 24, 29. I have a couple of exciting tournaments coming up. I'm playing in Spain next week, or starting next week, and so the next time you guys see me will be my game reviews from Spain. And then at the end of May, I will be playing in the American Continental, which is, if you guys recall, the tournament that I played 2 years ago where I had qualified to the World Cup and got my second GM one. So I have two very strong events coming up, two events also that I'm traveling to, which is different from a lot of these other tournaments I've been playing as of late, which are more so in New York City or on the East Coast. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing a travel event, looking forward to kind of like immersing myself in the game. And I also hope that my preparation for this coming week and just in general is better than it was going into this event. So this event, 4 out of 9, I had 3 losses, 2 draws, and 4 draws. Oh, sorry, 3 losses, 2 wins, and 4 draws. And we're going to go ahead and see actually all 3 of my losses. Now, typically, for most lessons I show you my wins, as they're nice games. And in this case, well, my losses were also nice games, and nice games to learn from, nice games to improve upon. And as I mentioned before, you'll get a little bit of a glimpse into what I missed, the types of mistakes that I actually was making, my reflections from those mistakes. And for tonight, it basically will be me teaching you guys through what I'm teaching myself as to what I need to improve upon and what I should have done in these games. All right. So the first game comes from actually round one. I played against Tawny, who I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. Now, actually, not too long ago, I think I showed a game against Tawny in another one of my events, which I got super, super lucky. Ended up winning. And this time around, Tawny, I could tell, was a lot more poised. He actually finally broke 2400 and is now officially International Master, pending, of course, approval. So definitely congratulations to him. Unfortunately, it came at the expense of my rating. But like I said, I could definitely tell he was a lot more poised. And after I played 1e4, I already was in not so great a position after he played e5, in the sense that he never plays e5, hardly ever at least, and I was mostly prepared for the Sicilian. In fact, I was pretty much solely prepared for the Sicilian. And of course, it's not like after e4, e5, I thought I was in deep, deep waters, but it was a little bit of a shock, for the very first move of the tournament for me to be out of preparation. And yeah, it definitely was not a welcome surprise. I had some interesting preparation in the Sicilian, thought I would get a cool game, and thought that we'd have a good battle in that. But okay, he plays e5, and after I played knight f3, he hit me with another surprise, knight f6. And if you know anything about Tawny himself, he's a very aggressive player by nature. And so when he played knight f6 and goes into the Petrov, I was first of all not just only taken aback that he's never played this before, but also taken aback that this was his choice. And as I was thinking about it, I sort of did realize that after knight f6, he very likely prepared for the lines in which I typically play against the Petrov, which are takes, knight f3, and knight c3, right? And I've actually shown, I think, a couple of games in this opening from my past tournaments. And if those of you remember that the most recent game was against Liam Putnam, in which it was a very, very chaotic game, a lot of insane moments. And this game actually right here is going to go very, very tangential to that game, very, very much so alongside that game. And I realized when Tawny played knight f6 that this very likely was the direction that he was going to take. That being said, I was sort of prepared for this in the sense that this is the line that I most confidently go for against the Petrov. And so even though I certainly could have played, you know, like d4 here, or I could have played d4 here, or of course I could play knight c3 here. I mean, if there's so many different options I could go for that I know here and there, I know lines here and there. I have to go off the assumption that if he's going to play the Petrov for the first time ever, he's going to have some preparation and everything. And simply put, I would rather play into something that I'm also prepared for as well. So yes, I knew that I was going into his preparation, and I'm sure that he had also checked the game against Liam before this game. I was like, okay, you know, how bad could it be? I know the lines, he knew the lines, we're going to play a game of chess, okay? So bishop to e7, bishop to e3, this is all sort of mainline theory. This also follows the game that I played against Liam back in November of 2024. Knight d7, queen d2, castles kingside, castles queenside, and c6. Now, this c6 line actually is very indicative of what Tawny's intentions were, because this c6 line is exactly what Liam had played back in November. And so basically I could for sure come to the conclusion that Tawny had prepared based off of that line, based off of that game. And even though I knew that was the case, once again, I was like, okay, I also remember some of the preparation and some of the ideas back from that game. In fact, one of the reasons why I knew some of the ideas so kind of closely was because of the lecture that I gave here at US Chess School online in that Liam Putnam game. So we're going to proceed. Bishop d3, d5, h4, knight c5, knight g5, h6. Maybe this is ringing some bells for those of you who are in that lecture, in that class. And now this is a good stopping moment, not for you guys, but for another point here, which is there are a few main lines. The two main lines being king b1 and rook de1. Now, this is a very, very, like, critical position in the sense that, okay, my knight's hanging and the main lines actually are sacrificing the knight. And once again, I knew he had seen that game against Liam, but at the same time, in the game against Liam, though I played rook de1, if I were to play king to b1 here, I would not know the lines as much as Tawny would, because I'm sure he had prepared the king b1 lines as well. And so here I was, right? I had to play rook to e1, and I did in this game because it's what I knew the best. And so here Tawny played the best move, which Liam did not play in the game, which is knight takes d3, takes, and f5. Now, once again, for those of you guys who were in this lecture back in, I think it was December, I had actually briefly mentioned that this was the best line that Black should go for. And funnily enough, in the lecture itself, I had mentioned that this f5 move is very unhuman-like to play. And frankly, it is. I had a little bit of a post-mortem with Tawny after the game, and he said he almost didn't go for this direction against me because when he was looking at the computer and the computer recommended f5, he was like, no way I'm playing f5. It's so weakening, right? The squares around black's king are very weak. It also relinquishes the defense of the e5 and e6 squares. It looks pretty bad. But as he was exploring it some more, he also realized that white's direction moving forward is not so clear. Of course, white has a good position, or white has a normal position. There's not a huge advantage here for either side. It's just an imbalanced position. But when I saw Tony play it, I was like, okay, he clearly did his homework. And at the same time, I was still not that perturbed. I was still not that disturbed by this continuation because I was still actually in my preparation as well. And so I relatively quickly played f4 here. And the reason why I could have so confidently played f4 here, which continues to sacrifice the knight, is the fact that in that game against Liam, pawn takes, this is actually the continuation. This is actually the way that game went, right? And the game against Liam went queen to d6, and here the very, very, very incredibly obvious bishop to d2 was the right move in which I had missed that game. And the idea actually is that oftentimes white can play c4 and shift the bishop over this way, which of course I had missed in that game, and if you guys remember, I actually had lost that game, unfortunately. So I played f4 with a lot of confidence, knowing that it is actually a good idea. Not only does it stop black from playing f4, but black cannot play h6, g5. Unfortunately for me, Tony also knew this was a good move and blitzed out bishop to d6. So, okay, finally it was now time for me to be out of my known lines in preparation. And I was like, okay, it's time to think. It's time to start thinking, which of course is the right direction, all right? As I have mentioned many, many times before for the times that we've talked about the opening, as soon as you are out of your opening preparation, especially in a tournament like this where everyone is so well prepared, you need to immediately take a moment, take a deep breath, understand the position, understand the characteristic of the position, and what has changed, what is different about this position compared to your preparation, and okay, play some chess. Once again, play some chess. You guys are all strong chess players. You know that there is work to be done in complex positions for what you need to figure out, right? You cannot just play based off of brief ideas that maybe you've seen before, right? There has to be calculation, and whenever there's small differences in a position, there needs to be that awareness, calculation, understanding, and everything that is involved in making a good decision. So here I actually had spent 25 minutes. This will be a first interesting stopping moment. I'm kind of curious the ideas that you guys will generate. So I will not be giving you guys 25 minutes. Okay, white to play. Just simply, come up with some sort of idea, have some sort of calculations behind it, and obviously also your assessment to whatever it is you put down. So white to play here, not going to be a long one. I'm just going to give you guys 2 minutes. Remember to be sending your answers directly in the chat. So let's see here. Okay, there we go. Restricting your guys' chat privileges now. So send your answers to me directly if you would like to interact with this position and give some suggestions for what white should play. 2 minutes. All right. 1 minute remaining. All right, last chances to send your answers in. Okay. So yeah, the main reason why I used the stopping moment is because, as I suspected, many of you guys came up with the exact candidate moves I was considering during the game. And as I briefly discussed this, you guys will understand why I did indeed spend 25 minutes. Now, the move that I think I saw suggested the most is the move that I actually played, which is knight f3. And that move essentially tells us that, okay, we're going to withdraw from the craziness of potentially sacrificing our knights. And as actually many people mentioned in the chat, there's ideas of like g3, swinging the bishop to d4 and e5, basically controlling the e5 square, and with it having some decent control of the position and hopefully a comfortable edge. So that right there, you can kind of guarantee you could play knight f3 and we're fine. In the sense that you play knight f3, white's not going to be any trouble for sure, right? But at the same time, we have here a very complex position. You cannot just blitz out knight f3, as you might be missing out on key opportunities. And so the other two, you could say they're not crazy, but more complex options for white are c4, and the other one that I considered was g4. Now, g4 is a very interesting move, but the unfortunate part about the move g4 itself is that I don't actually think the move g4 creates any major threats. That's the only main problem. After g4, you're not really threatening to take on f5. I mean, you're not, because you wouldn't want to play that because then bishop takes f5 comes. In fact, black can probably actually even take on g5 here. I don't remember exactly the calculations, or rather the continuations. But once I saw that g4 does not really actually make a threat here of taking on f5, I was sort of dissuaded from playing it. For example, one annoying move could be like queen f6, or queen somewhere. I think probably queen f6, or maybe another move I think was queen c7 was I was worried about. Now they have the threat of taking. I mean, I always have to calculate takes on g5. That's the main annoying thing. All these variations, I have to constantly be calculating h6, g5. And that is what is sapping so much time from the position itself, or from my clock, is that every single move I have to make sure they can't just take on g5 and get away with it. So g4 is not a bad move. It's not a bad move. It's a very interesting idea. But as soon as I realized that g4 doesn't actually make a threat in the position itself, I was very much so drawn away from the move. But the move that I seriously considered for probably about 15 minutes before I eventually decided on knight f3 was actually c4. And this move, once again, a lot of people have mentioned in the chat because it is very direct. It's a very, very direct move. Black cannot take on c4 for very obvious reasons. This wins material. So if black can't take on c4, then okay, they either have to allow us to take on d5, which will end up creating a weakness on d5, or what? Or taking on g5, right? And so after h6 g5, right, h6 g5, and for example h6 g5, we have the same sort of craziness that we've seen before. But what's the key difference, right? Shouldn't this be good for us? Isn't this exactly what we wanted? All these lines of playing h6 g5, opening up the h file. We also even have c4 included, and so that's of course what I was spending so much time deciphering. And then after a while thinking, I realized, okay, what is the benefit of this last move, bishop d6 for black? Why is it beneficial for black to have included bishop d6 before taking on g5, while also giving us this c4 move, which opens up more lines to the black king? And then I realized the very, very annoying move here is rook to e8. And what rook e8 does is it essentially pins my dark square bishop. Not in a absolute pin to where I can never move the bishop, but if I move my bishop and black exchanges the rooks, well, I'll show you guys. Let's say we play bishop d2, just to give an example. Rook takes e1. Well, we don't want to take with a rook because that will bring our rook off the h file. But at the same time, taking with the bishop is not at all appealing either, because we'll lose the f4 pawn. Or in just some cases, bishop's just on e1. And so we oftentimes, in a lot of these variations, have to spend a move playing like, rook to f1 or, some things like that, which will take time. And with that time, I was worried that black would be able to fix their position. Now, as it turns out, and I sort of had some feeling about this, but as it turns out, as white here, I can play a couple of different things. I could play like c6, c5 or c5, something that basically keeps the position as is, and I have enough compensation for the piece. But in terms of A, Tawny blitzing out things, and clearly he was within preparation, and B, me not being absolutely sure of the evaluation or not being able to calculate to some sort of point of clarity, I did not want to take this risk, however much calculated I thought it would be, or however much of like a exciting risk that it would be, when I knew that dropping the knight back to f3 was a safe option that gave me, a playable position. And not just a playable position, but one that white has decent play in. And so, in reflection, I don't see the 25 minutes that I spent here to have been a mistake in of itself. I think that at the end of the day, if you identify a position as a critical moment, you need to exhaust the options, especially if it is such an important moment, right? Remember, if you just blitz out knight f3 because you think it's the most logical move, then you're missing out on the potential opportunity that, let's say, g4 or let's say c4 or something else is critical here, especially because this was a critical moment by the nature of the fact that I'm out of preparation. This was the first move out of my preparation, so I need to take some time to get my bearings and to start calculating things. At the same time, do I wish that I had played c4 and taken that calculated risk? Well, in hindsight, yes, given how the game went. But in all reality, in all objectivity, I think that me playing knight f3 was still a good decision. It was still a good practical decision. If I played c4, it would have been a 3-result game, and certainly would have been a lot of imbalances tied to that. But okay, we played knight f3 instead. All right. But for everyone who suggested c4, suggested g4, suggested knight f3, those are all good ideas. But what I would hope would happen in a real game is you would actually take the time necessary to calculate those options and decide for yourself between those options and based on your evaluations of those options, which one you'd inevitably want to go for. Okay, I play knight f3, and Tawny, of course, blitzes out rook to e8. Okay, so he's still within his preparation. Knight f3 was indeed, one of the top moves, and so he was prepared for it. And then here I spent not as much time as he did on knight f3, but I spent a decent amount of time playing g3. So it was the idea that a lot of you guys had mentioned should be tied into knight f3 to support the f4 pawn and to bring the bishop to d4 and to e5 as just one example. But at the same time, whether you realize it or not, g3 is a committal move in of itself. Anytime you make a pawn move like this, you are making a commitment. Pawns cannot move backwards. And so let's think about what the pawn is now no longer doing. Well, the pawn is no longer supporting some of these light squares. In some cases, that could be critical. But the biggest thing that actually I was not concerned about, but wasn't too thrilled about, was the fact that the pawn on g3 actually covers the g3 square. And so I could never have any interesting ideas of maybe swinging the rook to g3, or even in some cases, I saw a lot of variations where the queen swings to g3. For example, one of the kind of funny lines I calculated was knight to e5. Takes, bishop to d4, and after rook takes, my idea was simply queen g3 and having all of his pressure. All right, so that's just to give an example of what could happen here. The main reason I didn't go for it here is because I was worried about rook to e4, and if I do go queen g3, there's at least, I think rook g4 is what I was worried about, or also just queen e7. I think queen e7 is fine as well. So there was many different ideas as to why I didn't really want to play g3, but at the end of the day, okay, after some time thinking, I thought that the immediate release of the bishop's duty of defending the f4 pawn and the possibility that it could bring with going to d4 into e5 was more valuable than any potential of the queen swinging to g3 or a rook swinging to g3, and so I played g3. Immediately, Tawny blitzed bishop to e6. So Tawny was still in his preparation. I was now down almost an hour on the clock at this point, a combination of me showing up 10 minutes late, as well as me being a little bit tentative in the opening, perhaps not fully wanting to go into this line, as well as the last couple of moves of, putting the bishop on e3, or sorry, putting the knight to f3 and playing g3 itself. So it's down a lot of time on the clock. And this brings us to the absolute critical moment of the game. And my prompt to you guys is white to play g4. This is the critical idea that came to my mind in this position. White to play g4. And my prompt to you guys is, would you like to play it? And if not, why? Or rather, what have you calculated as to why not? And if not, what would you like to play instead? So white to play here, g4, and do some calculations as to what in the world I'm talking about. What is this g4 move even doing? And then come to your own conclusions as to, should you play it? Is this a missed opportunity if we don't play it? Etc. What all those things that entails. So for this one, I'll give you guys 5 minutes to think here. White to play g4. This is, of course, a key decision, a very committal one. And so that brings about a critical moment if we legitimately think that g4 is an option. 5 minutes, you guys. Let's start thinking. Minute and a half remaining. Seeing a lot of good answers. Keep them coming. Less than a minute remaining. Make sure if you have some answers written out, send them in the chat. Alrighty. So I'm seeing a lot of very interesting answers here. Nearly everyone has at least seen the reason behind g4. Okay. So after g4, f takes g4, well, we've sacrificed a pawn. There has to be a reason for it. So after g4, f g4, white must play knight g5. Or rather, not must, it's not forced, but that is the main reason. That's the main idea. And after h6 g5, h6 g5, due to the absence of the rook on f8, there's no bishop f5, which means there's no stopping queen h7 check ideas. Now, a few people, due to the fact that queen h7 was unstoppable, had given me the decision that white must be crushing. We have queen h7. We have all these different ideas. Now, surely that can be your feeling. That can be your intuition. But you cannot base such a committal, critical decision like sacrificing a piece in this way based off of feelings, based off of intuition. At least not if you have the luxury to calculate it. This is not a blitz game. I have 55 minutes on my clock, right? So what did I do here? Okay, I spent 20 minutes calculating, just a context. g4, f takes g4, knight g5, takes. Black to move. So we've reached this point here, which many people reached. And many people came to vastly different decisions based off this position. So black to play. How should black continue? Of course, how black continues should narrate what your decision should have been in the first place. So black to play here, figure out what the best defense is. Regardless of whether it's winning for black, losing for black, equal for black, what is black's best defense? Right? What is black's best continuation? So black to play. So I'll give everyone another minute. Seeing a lot of good answers coming in. Less than 30 seconds. Send those answers in. Alrighty. So black only has one winning move here. So of course that means that g4 was indeed not the direction that that white should have taken, or that I should have taken, because I played this. So let's briefly talk about the defensive intuition here for black before we get into the nitty-gritty calculations. So obviously queen h7 is a threat. It's a big idea. It's what white's going to very likely play. But what else is there on the cards? There's f5. There's maybe perhaps the dark square bishop moving and the e-file opening. There's ideas of perhaps, the rook coming to h7 in some cases, targeting g7. So that means bishop d4 is also on the cards. So the main problem with a move like king f7 or king f8, beyond just the fact that I think it directly doesn't work, is that the move king f7 or king f8 by nature does not create any threats other than perhaps you trying to run away. And the thing about defending in positions like this is, due to the fact that white has so many different threats and so many different ideas, if you simply play a passive defensive move, it is very likely that at least one or some of white's ideas are going to be very, very challenging. And so, for example, after king f7, okay, f5, first of all, is very, very concerning for us. In fact, like, for example, f7, you go bishop d7, I go like f6, I think black's actually lost. Where's your king running to? That's the thing, right? When you play king f7, where was that king running to? That's a very good question to ask yourself, right? Because remember, like, you're literally not threatening king e7 because f5 is in play. So when we think about it here defensively, for both king f7 and king f8, you need to think to yourself, what is my next move? What is my intention with black? That's what you need to rationalize to yourself. Because when you play king f8 here, your next move is not king e7. You cannot play king e7. You're going to lose the piece after f5. I mean, of course, you can play king e7 and run the king d7 and just give up the piece. But, like, do you want to give up the piece if you don't have to? Maybe you have to. But remember, after king f8, I have f5. I have rook h7. I have rook h8. I have queen g6. I have all these ideas. And how are you going to justify just simply running the king away when you have not calculated and seen all those variations? That should be the mentality. Okay, and so when we go back to what the defensive understanding and intuition should be here, okay, light bulb moment. How can I actually make threats? How can I actually mitigate and, prevent some of white's big ideas? And that is why the most important move, queen d7. Now, it's a very logical move when you think about it. But for many of you guys, the first thing that came to mind was simply running the king, because you saw queen h7 check and you thought to prevent that by running the king, or you sought to kind of like, prepare for that by running the king. But this queen d7 move is incredibly important. We stop f5 ideas, at least for the, it being f5 and pushing our bishop back, right? You control the 7th rank. You also connect the rooks. You also create an additional, or not even additional, but like a safer path for the king to run, e7, d8, c7. So it turns out this queen d7 move achieves everything in terms of the defensive coordination and cohesion of pieces that black wanted to achieve. And so I had actually seen queen d7, and I'm going to get into the sort of reasons why I had missed some certain things, but okay, after queen d7, I have one more stopping moment for you guys in this game, which is I gave a check. king f8, and now rook h6. So for here, I don't want to spend too much time. I have a lot more things to get to. 2 minutes. Black to play here. Don't fall for my tricks. Black to play here, rook to h6. 2 minutes. One minute remaining. All right. A lot of you guys are catching on. So let's start to review what the tricks are. Now, some very logical moves. Bishop f5 was not actually suggested by a lot of people, but if not for rook takes d6, then bishop f5 would indeed win. But now actually white is better. Not winning, but white is better. So rook takes d6 is very key. Takes, take, in g6. And black's in big trouble. So bishop g8. What's the whole point of this rook h6 move? Rook f6 check. Gotta be careful. Have to look out for your opponent's resources. Now, king e7 was mentioned, I think I saw. Now, king e7, at the very least, I can play f5 and win a piece. At the very least. Another tempting move is even play rook takes e6, but it's probably not as good though. Queen takes e6, maybe bishop d2, but I mean, yeah, this is probably not as good. So I think at least f5. At the very least, f5 wins the piece back. So, I mean, this is already not so good. The best move, and the most versatile move, queen f7. Once again, we make threats. We're actually now threatening to take on h6. Oh, and actually, no one actually took on h6, which I'm a little bit surprised by. Well, not the fact that it's a good move and that you guys missed it, but I just thought someone would play it. Queen h8 here actually is perpetual. This gets mated, and if bishop g8, queen f6, actually, if you don't play bishop f7 and just make the draw, you might be in trouble, actually. For example, here, black's actually losing, if I remember correctly. So gh6 is no good, makes a draw. Queen f7. Unfortunately, Tommy found this. And the point is that it makes a threat. Black is now threatening to take on h6. And I completely missed this queen f7 move. That's one of the things I had missed in the game. Completely missed this queen f7 move. As it turns out, after king f8 here, I could have stirred the pot greatly with this move bishop d4. After which the variations, frankly, are absurd. The idea is that if, like, let's say, takes f4, king g1, the point is now that, you know, we have threats on the f file, this, and so this is just no good for black. If something like bishop to g8, Then I believe the idea was like queen g6 if I'm not mistaken, and we just have good pressure here. Frankly, if I had seen that rook h6, queen f7 loss, queen f7 lost, then I would have played bishop d4. And one of the other nice ideas is, yeah, I think it was, okay, so this is a really, really insane line. So queen g6, this is actually what Tawny had seen. Tawny had seen bishop d4 because, well, he was looking for my moves. So takes, his intention here is rook to d8. And it turns out that white has a crazy move, bishop to f6 here. The point is if the rook goes away, then we have takes, which is the main reason why black has to play rook d8 in the first place. If black takes here, there's now once again perpetual, which is absurd. And if, well, as it turns out, the best move for black is not to take the perpetual and to play queen f7. Because after queen takes, and I think bishop takes, black is better in this endgame. But yeah, okay, I missed these variations entirely because I thought rook h6 drew. I forgot about queen f7, or just missed queen f7. Not even forgot about it, I just missed it. The rest of the game was actually kind of cool. I played g6, which definitely was the best practical try, with f5 ideas. The point now is that the h6 rook is now untouchable. Can't take this either because of queening ideas. So bishop takes f5, rook f1, takes e3, take, and my tricks continued. Rook f7. It turns out both legal logical moves of queen takes f7 and king e6 win. Takes, bishop f4 is winning for black. But he played king e6, after which I played rook takes g7, which, crazily enough, there's only one winning move here for black. Because after queen takes, pawn takes, I queen my pawn because this is discover check, which I thought was kind of cute. But of course I knew he would find the winning move, which is bishop to f4. And the point is, if I get out of the checkmating threats, then queen h7, and now the rook hangs. And another funny moment is that black still only has one winning move here, because I'm threatening the queen, and bishop g7, which is not that difficult, but it's still kind of cool. So all in all, okay, what the moment you guys have all been waiting for is, why did I play g4? What did I miss? After 20 minutes of calculation, what did I miss? And what was my mindset at? Where was my mind at? So the things that I explained to you guys, I all understood. I understood that Tawny had blitzed all this out, so he was very lucky in preparation, but that didn't really disturb me because, he could have messed up his preparation. He could have, missed that g4 was a critical move. Like I said, what if g4 was just a draw and he needed to play accurately after that, right? So that was not really a factor. But what was a factor is I knew g4 was a very critical move that is sacrificing a piece, because my intention was knight g5, so I'm sacrificing a piece. So I knew that this was a moment that needed to be calculated. That's why I spent so much time on it. However, I actually did not do my due diligence, similar to how a lot of you guys gave your answers in the chat. So after g4, takes knight g5, takes. For whatever reason in my mind, I calculated a lot of lines very generally. And what I mean by that is I looked at a lot of lines, and I looked at a lot of ideas that I had, but for whatever reason, I didn't actually look at specific variations. And so I saw all my ideas of queen h7 and f5, and I saw some specific variations where I would win. And because of my desire to make g4 work, and because of course, all of the, very, very creative and very strong ideas I do have against the black king, I essentially at some point thought to myself, surely this works, right? I mean, I have the e file cut off, I have f5, I have queen h7, I have the h file, I have g6 ideas, right? And so even though I saw queen d7 was a possibility, what I remember actually in my calculations was that after queen h7, for whatever reason, I only saw king f7. After which I saw f5 as an idea, as one idea, and I also saw rook h6 as an idea, which is kind of why I saw rook h6 in the game. But also what I missed, and this is actually probably the if I were to, once again, very vigorously self-reflect about this mistake, is after king f8, f5, I thought I had. The point is after bishop f5, I have rook f1, and I'm able to, at very least, pick up the rook on a8. But I missed bishop g8, queen g6, and I thought I was doing very well here. Ideas of f6, the queen can't move because of the d6 bishop, so we can't go like queen f7. But this is what I had missed. This I remember missing. So this is one of the things I missed. A very easy tactic. But once again, I had preconditioned myself in these variations to think that this is the way to go. And so oftentimes in a lot of my variations, I was too reliant on my intuition and my desire to play g4 that pushed me to think that all these variations were going to work out. And so after queen g7, queen h7, king f8, if I had specifically calculated what exactly my variations, or rather my direction would look like, I'm pretty sure I would have seen that f5 doesn't work. I would have seen that beyond f5, what really are my ideas here? Black is threatening bishop g8. Black has bishop f5 ideas. Black has these rook takes e3 ideas. I'm not the only one with threats anymore, and I'm down a whole piece. If I had seen all this, I would have realized that I cannot commit to g4. I cannot calculate to a victory. I cannot calculate even to a draw because it doesn't exist. I lose there. And what I would have played, very likely at least, is bishop d4, or maybe h5. So to answer actually the question that I initially posed, the main ideas were bishop to d4, or the main ideas were knight d4, knight e5. I mean, all those moves are fine. Nothing here is actually much better than the others. I simply posed the question to you guys as a feeler for what you guys would have played. But many different moves are good here. Bishop f2, bishop d4, h5 is fine. Everything but g4. And here's the problem in terms of like decision making. When you know that you're in a critical moment like this, just like I knew in the game, you need to settle yourself in your mind as to what exactly your thought process must look like for you to come to the right verdict. And in this exact critical moment, I knew I was sacrificing a piece. I knew this was a commitment as to which I needed to calculate until clarity. I needed to calculate until there was specifically something that was there, specifically something that like I'm winning or I'm drawn or whatever, right? So that is what my thought process should have looked like. That is what my thought process needed to look like for me to actually realize g4 was not the direction. Black has defensive resources. Black has threats. It's no good. And I could have played any move here. And okay, who knows how the game would have gone. But I wouldn't have lost in this way. I wouldn't have lost in this continuation. I wouldn't have made the careless decision to play g4. And you might think, you might look at my time usage and saw that I spent like, I think 18 or something minutes. And you may think, that's not a careless decision. And okay, to some extent it wasn't. Because there was things I actually did miss. It was simply a miscalculation. Not necessarily a careless decision, there was miscalculations. But my mindset itself was careless. My mindset itself had too much kind of desire to play g4 because I wanted it to work. I wanted it to work so badly, right? My psychology was just not there. And if there's anything that I've told you guys over the past year plus of doing these online classes, is that when it comes to the thought process itself, you need to understand that there's many different reasons why you make either small or big mistakes that you think that you usually would not make, right? I would say on a normal day, if you gave me here white to play and calculate g4, I would have seen the continuations. I would have seen those rook takes e3 ideas. But my thought process was altered by my desire for g4 to work. I was not asking myself the question, does g4 work? I was telling myself, g4 works. Let's find out why. That's the problem. That's the thought process that I had. That's sort of the, ideas that I had, which is just not good. It's not good because in this moment, in this critical moment, I needed objectivity. I needed some sort of clarity about g4 and knight g5. I needed it for it to be there to actually fully back up my decision to play g4. Okay? So in this, game itself, what I realized about my own calculations and what I realized about, my own decision making is that, well, I'm a lot more swayed by, you know, those types of psychological pressures, a pressure that I put on myself to make G4 work, than I thought. And at the end of the day, another thing is, okay, I need to work on calculation, as do we all, right? Had I calculated better, had I seen rook takes e3 faster, had I seen all these different variations that I had showed you guys, I probably could have come to the decision, probably could have come to the calculation, and would have found out G4 is no good. Instead, could have played anything here. I would have been fine. It would have been equal. We would have had a game. It would have been about imbalanced game. Would have been an interesting game. Would have been a complex game. And then and after reflecting on the game, immediately after, I was not all too frustrated actually. Because what I realized essentially was that, well, first of all, he played a good game. He was well prepared, much better prepared than I was. And after I made the mistakes, he capitalized. But also on top of that, I realized that, okay, I mean, I know where to go from here. And for you guys, in terms of like when you play bad games, or rather when you lose, right? What should encourage you is you have a future ahead of you. That was not your last chess game. If this was my last ever chess game and I ended it like this, that would be incredibly depressing. The fact that I, you know, played G4, miscalculated, and all of that, right? So that's one thing. All right, that is what actually kind of picked me up to kind of keep going. Now, of course, the rest of the tournament went okay. I still lost rating after this game right here. But what I will say is that I've learned a lot in terms of the mentality of recovering from losses and the different types of things that I tell myself to sort of get me back into the chess playing mood. Because the thing is that, you know, if you let this one loss affect the mentality that, you know, I'm a bad chess player, or, you know, this is terrible, right? I shouldn't be playing chess. Then once again, that psychology of how you would approach each and every decision will now get changed, will now get edited in a way that you don't want it to be. You'll start being more careless. You'll start being more, you know, overly aggressive or overly passive, trying to draw every game so that you don't lose instead of being objective and pressuring. So as an additional kind of like anecdote for after the game, I immediately made reflections on what went wrong, what I probably should have done in terms of maybe choosing a different opening, maybe just simply calculating a little bit more and not playing G4, or maybe playing C4. I realized after the game, I was like, maybe I could have gone for C4. And he told me after the game that he actually wasn't prepared after C4. That was not a move that he had checked. So of course that gets me. But I didn't let those what ifs cause me to kind of like be upset or, you know, be depressed about it. I instead intellectually thought to myself, okay, I know there's things that need to be worked on to the next game, okay? And frankly, that is something that that kind of thought process, or rather that recovery process of after losses, is not something that I've learned a long, long time ago. It is something that has been developed very recently. And so for each and every one of you guys, in terms of reflecting on your losses and realizing what went wrong, and actually, you know, improving your thought process moving forward, I highly encourage you guys to self-reflect, to be honest with yourself. What went wrong in your games, okay? And to also kind of find little tricks for yourself to encourage yourself and to realize, okay, this is not my last chess game in my career. There's more to be played, all right? And if I'm going to just let this one loss define my day, define my tournament, then I'm not going to extract the most information about my self-improvement as I can, as I should. So yeah, I mean, hopefully going into my tournament in Spain next week, things go better. I thank you guys for tuning in per usual. I will see you guys after my Spain event, where I hopefully will have more good news, and instead of reflecting on my losses and reflecting on what I should be improving, we'll reflect on what I can improve, but from the sense that I've won some chess games. All right, so I'll see you guys in a few weeks. Take care, have a good night, and hopefully for those of you guys who are playing over the next few weeks, best of luck. All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.